Good morning and welcome to this year's APS Spring Conference. My name is Leslie MacLeod and I will be bringing you conference live from our offices here in Edinburgh. We have got a great lineup of people today, a whole host of industry experts, people who are at the top of their game and ahead of the pack. They are going to be helping us today to explore the topic of progress and prevention, those things which you learn best from experience, the things that we hope don't happen too often, the things that can go wrong and the lessons that we learn. Now, I'm not a stranger to getting things wrong, but unlike the majority of you today, I have never worked in a safety critical environment. So my mistakes, while they are embarrassing, sometimes career limiting, have never been likely to be the kind of thing that would have resulted in anyone actually getting injured. But I have done my fair share of working under stress and to very tight deadlines and timescales, so I know just a little of the pressures at work that you must be facing. I've also spent a lot of time helping train people who are going to fill those industry places behind me. As a result, I know a thing or two about learning from experience. And there's nothing really quite like it, as we all know. Years ago now, I was a university lecturer, teaching the next generation of people going into public relations and journalism. Most of their education had come from books. It was all about communication theory and Harvard referencing, and getting additional marks for group work and poster presentations. But it wasn't the real world. And I was there just to try to give students a flavour of what the industry they had chosen to go into was really going to be about. And one of the hardest lessons that I tried to get across to people is as applicable in the construction sector as it is in public relations and the social scientists. And that is, no one, except perhaps your mum and maybe your nearest and dearest on the good day, is interested in you and what your opinions are. You are there to help other people on their projects or with their problem. So it's all about them. It is your job to put your ego to one side and do your best for your client. And that at APS is a lesson that we try very hard to remember. Any membership association worth its salt will be the same. It's all about the members. Anyone who goes into this line of work wanting the spotlight to be on them is in the wrong job. That's very easy for me to say because I'm standing here in the spotlight. And more than that, we're sitting in a nice, warm, safe office, while many of you are out on the sharp end, where a slip or a trip can lead to life-changing injuries and mistakes that can cost millions for the client or in damaged reputations. So today, we're going to put you front and centre, right where you ought to be, because your safety and the safety of your clients and colleagues are what matter. We have put together a very special collection of speakers for you today. You're going to be hearing from our great lineup, talking about their real-life experiences and the things that we can all learn when things go wrong. But before we get going, let me share a couple of my own examples. Take Budget Day. Now, we've all seen the doorstop shot on the day, that one where the Chancellor holds up Gladstone's big red box. Well, I used to look after all the outside broadcast crews and the photographers that gather in number 11 to catch sight of the Chancellor when he comes out. Now, we knew better than actually to put anything in the box because the catch didn't work. And it wouldn't have been the best of looks to have had the Chancellor's papers fluttering all over St James's Park. But what I hadn't banked on was having any difficulty with the camera crews, because camera crews, including our lovely people here today, are very professional. And besides, there was only one lot of them, because we did it on a pooled basis, which means that you use one set of crews and they make the pictures available to everybody. Now, there was this year. I was upstairs in the flat at number 11 before Ken Clarke, because he was Chancellor at the time. He was getting ready to head off to go over to the Houses of Parliament, where he was going to deliver the speech. Now, he was hunting about for his tie, because Ken was a lovely person, but not perhaps the world's best organised. So I raced off down the stairs to tell the waiting BBC crew that he was on his way. Now, I committed a rookie error. I hadn't checked to see that the red light was on or off on the camera, and it was on. So I ended up bouncing into shot and broadcasting live to the nation. Well, I think it pleased my mum, but it cost me a small fortune in wine because at the time, government press officers had an informal system of forfeits if they were caught on camera. But I didn't do it again. Now, I've also worked for the UK banks. I worked for them right through the financial crisis. And while it may not have been life-threatening in the normal sense of the word, it was certainly one of those things where if I'd got the tone wrong or a word out of place, it would have had a devastating effect on the British financial system, on people's savings, on people's pensions, on people's livelihoods. I mean, we certainly saw that with the ill-fated Liz Truss financial moment that we had back in the autumn. So you had to be very careful about what you said. And you were also, because it was also a membership association, you were representing a whole group of banks who possibly had very different things in mind about what they thought we could say. Now, I very quickly realised then I had to be very careful with the words that I chose. And I have even once, when I was with them, I committed the ultimate email howler. And I copied in a whole load of people who would have best have remained quite in the dark about the fact that I had not invited them to a dinner that I was arranging at the Mansion House. Now, that one made the diary column in the Times. And that's not really something you want to do, particularly not when your PR person has become the story and the speaker on the night had not. So I've been extra careful with that one ever since. But maybe, although hopefully not, that will be famous last words, because it's always the kind of thing that you think to yourself, oh, I won't do that again. And then sometimes you do. But I'm sure nothing so trivial or so embarrassingly stupid and careless has happened to our speakers today. The association is immensely grateful to everyone for giving up their time to help us and to speak to you. We're very grateful that they are prepared to own up to their experiences so that we can all learn from what has happened to them. And I'm delighted to say we have a very full programme. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about what you're going to expect for the rest of the day. We have 4 sessions in the morning, starting with Kissy Augustine, who is a top legal eagle at the famous firm of Mishkin de Rea. Now, Mishkin de Rea are best known to me as experts in libel law, and it's perhaps just as well that we draw a tactful veil over how I know all about that. But Kissy is going to be talking to us today about liability and where the law has a role in mistakes and recovery when they happen. She's going to be followed by a short film from our in-house experts, Mark Snelling and Andrew Leslie, who are going to be telling you a little bit more about our Building Safety Act series of webinars and the information that we're getting out from that. Now, for anyone who hasn't signed up for the series yet, it's not too late. It's well worth catching up, because Mark and Andrew are providing great technical detail and updates on the shape of the secondary legislation as things become clearer. All of your APS webinars are available to play back at a time to suit you. You just need to log on to the website. You'll all remember it. It's www.aps.org.uk. Simple as that. If you want to be clever about it, just go /events. Then we're going to have a coffee break, or maybe I'm going to have a bit of a lie down in a darkened room, depending how this goes. And then we're back with Dr. Sean Lundy from Tetra Consulting. Sean will be taking a look at risk and helping us prepare in advance so we can head disasters off at the pass before they get there. Then we're going to round off the morning session with your opportunity to get involved. Now, we're going to be looking at the big 4 accidents that appear on the RIDDOR statistics. So we're going to have sessions that you can join. You get to pick 2. So start thinking about that now. You get to pick 2, and the 4 are slips and trips, safety around vehicles, hazards working from dust, and then working at height. You can join 2 of those live today because we're going to play the sessions back to back. The ones that you join live, we're going to have our presenters are going to be in the background, so you're going to be able to ask live questions. So if you think you want to ask a question, join those live today. Watch the other 2 back whenever it suits you. But remember, contributors are going to be live in the chat, so those are the ones you should join today. Then we're going to have a debate with our 4 experts, and then off to lunch, and then we will be able to take some questions before lunch of that panel. Off to lunch, back in the afternoon, and then we're going to have some real-life case studies and experience learned. So we're going to have 2 sessions first, one from Sarah Schubert, who has been very much involved with the Turkish and Syrian earthquake. She works for the Civil Protection and Emergency Management Group. She's then going to be followed by Kevin Crawford, who many of you will know because he's the current president of SEAT. And he's going to be talking about the Edinburgh Schools Inquiry and the lessons that were learned from that. Then we're in the home stretch, and there's going to be a couple of case studies. We've got the wonderful Leslie Nidd, who's going to be here talking from Network Rail, and she's going to be talking about something that happened, the lessons that they didn't learn first time round, and why it's important to learn those because they went on to have a second accident. And then we're going to have Dreisten Salter, who works for the Environment Agency in their FCRM operations team. Now, I'm going to have to ask him what FCRM means because I don't know. But he is an expert on flooding, flood preparedness, and then risk recovery. But that's a long way off yet. And at the moment, what we've got, just to get your day off to a good start, I'm going to have my President-elect, Ray Bone. And Ray is going to be taking you through 1 or 2 of the industry expert themes that he has for his presidency. Ray's got very firm ideas about how you make things safer, and he's a keen champion about mental health. So Ray wants to have a quick word about you to set today in context, and then once Ray has spoken, I'm going to bring on my presidential team. That's my past president, Jonathan Moulam, my future president, Mark Snelling, and we're going to have a little bit of a chat about the things that are current in the industry and why that makes a difference to safety. So without further ado, can I hand over to Ray, please? Are you there,
Good morning.
Good morning,
everyone.
Ray. Where are you today?
I'm in Hull,
Ray,
where it's a beautiful blue sky and sunshine, and it's raining through the windows.
It's always lovely to see you, Ray, but I'm really sorry that, it's lovely here in Edinburgh at the moment as well, which makes a difference. I mean, we had a horrible weekend, so it's lovely to see you. I'm just going to leave you to it. I'll be back with you when we bring Jonathan and Mark back in. So speak to you soon.
Okay, thank you very much, Leslie. So slight correction there. I'm the president. Mark Snelling is the president-elect, but there we are. Never mind, first mistake. So soon addressed. So I'll start by saying hello and good morning to everybody. I'm sure most of you know who I am, but for those who don't, my name's Raymond Bone, and I'm the current president of the Association for Project Safety. I'm delighted to be here to join all of you today at this year's APS Spring Conference. And we've got lots to talk about regarding progress and prevention. Or in other words, the lessons that we've learned from those things what's not gone quite according to how we planned them to go. Certainly I've learned from my mistakes, and from all the books that I've read or courses that I've been on, training that I've received. And believe me, there's been plenty of those over the past years. So I've been president of the APS since last October, and believe me, it seems like a lifetime ago. There's been so much happening. But let's take a look at some of them things, what's changed since I've been in as president. So at the end of last year, the association voted on its new constitution. And by February, that was all sorted by the shouting. With the election of new board members and the appointment of our first national members representative group. If you don't know who any of those people are, you'll find out all about them on our website. But the important issue about the National Members Representative Group, or the NMRG, is that with their permanent seat on the APS board, they're now able to make sure that the voice of our members will not ever be forgotten or overlooked. I think this is vital because I want to make sure APS stay close to its members and what their members need, especially in a world that seems to be changing around them all the time. I'm sure they'll ask to keep my feet very close to the fire when it comes to delivering on my presidential promises. I'll say a bit more about them in a moment. But for now, we've just completed putting the final pieces of the puzzle in place with the appointment of Professor Sam Olwinkle from Edinburgh's Napier University. Sam's joining us as the independent chair of the board of directors to bring a more focused approach to what we are about and to keep our thoughts on the association's strategic objectives. In Sam, we also have the great benefit of finding a true industry expert who has some considerable standing across the sector, something that's going to be vital as we try to get our voice heard across that sector and with legislators and the regulators. As an aside, we've made great progress over the last couple of years with the APS featuring in an increasing number of consultations and even in parliamentary debates. Our recent visit to Westminster last week to see our Member of Parliament, Joanne Cherry, will have done us no harm either. She's promised to keep in touch with the APS and to help us bring to the attention of parliamentarians the key issues and concerns facing the construction industry. She's particularly interested in one of my key areas for action, which is mental health. So you'll be hearing more about that in the coming months, as I just don't think we talk enough about the things what are bothering or concerning us. But getting back to Sam, reading his CV is like a who's who and what's what in the industry, as he's been involved over the years in so much and so many of the improvements that we can now see. Aside from his undoubted technical skills and his understanding of how to put that across so people are able to understand and learn, Sam has an outstanding track record in helping develop competency frameworks. And competency is very much the buzzword at the moment. Sam's already been helping Andrew with what APS members will need to know and how they're going to be able to demonstrate their skills and experience to employers and clients. I can assure you, you're going to be hearing much more about this in the coming months. But for now, I know the construction sector is still trying to come to terms with the fallout from last year's Building Safety Act. And before those of you who work outside of England get it up, I know the legislation applies to England only, but I still believe the Act will have ramifications in all corners of England and the devolved administrations as everyone seeks to make sure there's consistency across our four nations. The Act has certainly been keeping the APS busy. We are very lucky to have in our President-elect, Mark Snelling, one of the very few people in the country who actually understands the Act inside out. Importantly, Mark has also an inside track on how secondary regulations are currently shaping up. Mark and our head of membership, Andrew Leslie, have been delivering an occasional series of webinars on the Building Safety Act. They've been attracting a huge online audience and will carry on right through until the end final shape of the rules are clear and are in operation. And if you've missed any of them webinars, it's worth logging onto the APS's website and watching from the start as the information builds up over time. Remember, all APS webinars are yours to keep once you've signed up, as is today's event. It just takes a click and away you go. I'd like to thank the APS team for the webinars and the information that's currently being put out there. The association hosts webinars and CPD events, regularly attracting live audience in excess of 300 people. There's also a focus on continuing professional development, CPD, with a programme of online seminars, and also a dedicated journal which is highlighting emerging and concerning health and safety and wellbeing issues across the built environment. We only ask extra funding for our 2 annual paid conferences each year, and that's just to cover the cost of the production. One of my presidency aims is to make sure the APS is a genuine community where members can get the help and support they need. As I've said, one of my key priorities for the association is to expand our horizons so we look beyond traditional health and safety or even design risk management. I want us to lead the way in a focus on well-being, not just to help those people already working in construction, but to make the sector a career of choice for more people. And we need to do something. When we surveyed our members, you, for the first ever APS monitor, our plan was to take an annual in-depth look at a single key topic facing professionals in the built environment. I've been hearing everywhere that there was a massive skill shortage. Our friends at the Federation of Master Builders found their members were struggling to find skilled tradespeople. So we asked you if you were having problems recruiting to fill your vacancies because we thought you'd be in the same boat. So frankly, when the initial results came in, I was a bit shocked as you were not reporting problems at all. But once we looked more closely at the results, the reason you don't seem to be having the same difficulties finding the people you want is simply because you are approaching people directly to offer them jobs. I'm not saying that's not working for you, but what I am saying is that it isn't sustainable. As staff are simply climbing on a merry-go-round where they get offered more money and often better conditions like additional holidays, and that's an enticement for them to jump ship. In some cases, you reported even having to lower your expectations regarding qualifications and experience. And that worries me, as safety isn't something you learn overnight, and we need to have the very best people working on projects if we expect safety standards to be maintained. But who's going to maintain them standards, and how is this going to bring on new talent? Especially as none of us are getting any younger. Some of you have already hung up your hard hats, and despite government encouragement, you have no plans to return back to work. We asked those of you who are still working about where you thought you would be and what you thought you would be doing in 3 years' time. And an awful lot of you said you might be pinging your challenges and thinking about retiring. I hope members are aware of a full range of services that can assess part of that membership package. As well as the more visible online events, APS also has a legal, insurance and financial helplines. We offer podcasts and access to technical support and information. And then there's your quarterly magazine, the Project Safety Journal, as well. Recently, when we asked you, you said you liked the webinars, the CPD and the magazine. But we won't be resting our laurels there. We will keep on trying to improve the things you like, adding in new and innovative ways to keep in touch. I really believe that for a small organisation, the APS compares extremely favourable with the bigger and better resource membership associations. Not that I'm going to name any names, but members of those bodies will know who they are. I'm very proud of our events, and it's worth noting that in the first 3 months of this year alone, APS has had over 1,600 individual log-ons to separate things the association is hosting. It's certainly all very different to what the APS was delivering even a short time ago, and we have been learning as we go. I know it can be easy to think you've nothing more to learn, that you have been there, seen it all, and that's understandable. Many of you have been in the same job for the same people for some considerable time. In fact, 3 in 5 of you said you'd been in the current role for 6 years or more. Significantly more than a third of you said you'd been in the same job for more than 15 years. In fact, very few of you also showed much inclination to consider a change of job or employer. More than 4 out of 5 of you said you had no plans to move on. those who did say they thought change was on the cards were the ones saying they were planning to retire. The built environment badly needs new blood, and another of my priorities is to encourage younger professionals at the start of their careers to come along and meet us older APS hands. And that's one of the reasons why we'll be taking APS back out onto the road starting in the autumn of this year. I know you've missed the networking, and it's a great way to introduce new people to our APS family, especially as I believe the experiences we can share are vital to help people learn. And that takes us to the hub of what today's Spring Conference is all about. I lecture at the University of Hull, and despite the fact I work hard to make sure what I say is relevant and engaging, I often worry for some students what they are taught goes into one ear and then straight out of the other. Certainly, I know I learn best when I'm being told in rooted and real life experiences. But in safety critical situations, that's not practical or safe. You can't have people continuing to make the same life-threatening mistakes. So today's event is about sharing our experiences so we can hopefully learn from each other and avoid some of the pitfalls ourselves. I'm very grateful to all of our contributors for giving up their time today, and we've got an excellent lineup of top flight speakers, as Leslie's previously said. But despite that, I'm going to get proceedings underway with a debate with my colleagues on the presidential team. I'm joined by President-elect Mark Snelling and my immediate predecessor, Jonathan Moulam. I thought it might be interesting to have a debate about the changes we have all seen in the industry and the lessons we think we can still learn from them. So, welcome both. It's good to see you today. How are you? Jonathan, how are you, sir, past president?
I'm great, Ray, and it's great to be here with yourself and Mark to have this brief chat. You know, I've been in the industry since 1976, and there's been an awful lot of change in that time.
It certainly has. Well, welcome, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us. Over to Mark. Good morning, Mark. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm a mere spring chicken compared with no, I'm not. I've been working in safety since '95 when the CDM regs came in, and I worked in construction before that. So I've been around for a while. I don't like to believe I'm this old. I am.
I know, I'm the same. Well, thank you very much. Okay, Leslie, would you like to get us started?
Yeah, of course. Well, welcome, gentlemen, and welcome to you all to our. This is the APS answer to Dickens's Christmas Carol. This is my personal set of ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. Obviously, you know them all, so they don't need any further introduction from me. Safe to say that Jonathan finished up being president in February. Well, that's not quite true. There was a strange sort of transition period. Ray came in October. The new board came in February. There was a sort of an odd transition period. Ray's going to be with us until Mark takes over in 2025. So I thought we would just bring all three of them together today and just ask them a little bit about the changes that they've seen since they've been in the industry. Jonathan, you were saying to me just the other day, when you were recalling your early days as a young engineer on site, that things have changed quite a lot. Would you mind just sort of recalling some of those experiences for us and why you think things have maybe changed for the better?
Yeah, certainly, Leslie. Yeah, I started, as I said, back in '76, and I joined a small contractor. Then after a couple of years with recession, I went back to college and Polytechnic. And I remember my time quite vividly when I was out on placement, and I was working on site in London at the Bomber Command Museum, and we were constructing a space frame roof. And I remember vividly that the cranes would come on site, do lifts. Oh, there was no plan. A lot of it was left to the skill set of the train driver. And on one particular afternoon, right at the end of the day, he got probably no more than a meter too far away, and during the lift, the front of his crane lifted up, and you could have walked under it. The skill of the man was to lower the load sufficiently to allow us to get out of the way with no damage caused. He could have just dropped the load and whatever else, but he didn't. But that was in 1981, and an awful lot of what we were doing then, we didn't really plan. And I think the big difference is legislation has come in. Lola came in 98, along with the whole raft of other legislation, being driven by the European directives. And we now have the ability to plan what we do. We actually sit down and work out how we do stuff, which wasn't really happening, I have to say, when I started in the industry way back then. So it's been a vast change. A lot of it legislation driven, which is absolutely correct. Our problem now is we might see some of that legislation thrown onto a bonfire, as this government would like to call EU legislation.
The EU revocation bill, because it's something that I know that you're very involved with. But I think there's also an underlying issue there about the way we behave is now very different. You were talking about there about how we plan things much more in advance. Ray, I know that how people behave and their attitudes to one another is something which has become very important to you. And as you said, mental health is one of the subject areas that you want to highlight during your presidency. I know that you're concerned that although we see accidents on site, like as Jonathan sort of alluded to, the accident levels are maybe not as severe as they once were, but the numbers are still quite cripplingly high. What do you think? How do you think your mindset affects those decisions that you take? Because you were talking a lot about how you thought that attitudes maybe had changed and the risks were maybe less severe, but the numbers were still persistently high. Ray?
I think thank you, Leslie. I think there's two elements to that. I think there's the theoretical side and the practice side. So I think theoretically we're following legislation, we're putting things in place, we're identifying risks, and then we're addressing risks. But I don't think that necessarily gets put to the people on the face of the construction activities. I think things are still skipped over, information's still not getting flowed down to them people. I'm still not convinced supervision is where it needs to be. So I still think there is a gap there. We really need to look at what's gone wrong. How do we learn from that? How do we share that information? And how do we make sure the people on the face of the work is getting that information? An example of that, I was working as a principal designer for a client, and they brought in a scissor lift to a steel portal frame, and it was much easier for the two operatives to get into the scissor lift and elevate it to the second floor to 2 stories and then jump out of the scissor lift onto the portal frame, because that was much easier than using the hacky stairs that was provided. And I spotted this and I asked the site manager, are you going to deal with that or am I? So he said, no, I'll deal with it. I had to leave and go to a meeting in the offices at the same site, and I was there for 2 hours. When I come back, I asked the site manager what action he took. And he said, well, I've given them yellow cards. To me, that should have been red cards, and that would have put the message out across the site of the safety standards expected. But he issued yellow cards, and then he said he'd given a toolbox talk to the rest of the members on site, which was 30-odd people, which I thought was, okay, that's acceptable. So I asked what the topic was of the toolbox talk, and it was COVID-19. Absolutely, completely irrelevant to the issues, what was identified. So I think theoretically we're there or thereabouts, but I think in practice we've still got gaps. We still need to be learning from things, sharing information, etc.
Mark, that was something I think that I heard you say the other day, that you felt that part of the problem with getting that safety message out there was very much that people saw the being taken aside, those toolbox talks, as sometimes being both very onerous, but also being some sort of punishment. There was quite a punitive feel to safety, particularly when people are trying to make a living.
It's interesting. I heard Ray said, "Oh, I should have been a red card," and it's interesting. I winced, and I don't know if I'm getting soft in my old age, but I really feel that success in any of this, and this is really from experience. I was extraordinarily aggressive in my young days, probably because I didn't have any real true belief in what I knew, and it really didn't do me any good. And I think it's trying to bring everybody together. I work with a great man, a guy called Logan Colbeck, who used to be safety director of BOC, British Oxygen. He came to work for me in sort of semi-retirement, and he went on to a site. He was asked to oversee this quite complex demolition project, and it went fantastically. We had concerns about demolition contractor, but absolutely fantastically. Because he had this beautiful way about him where he absolutely knew everything, but he engendered people following him and wanting to do the right thing. And then he finished that job and he went on to inspect another job where the same demolition contractor has come in, and it was shocking. It was terrible. And he walked on and said, "What's happening here?" And the supervisor turned around and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were involved." And it is about people. This is all about people. It's treating people with respect. And if you can actually, I'm I have to say I'm not the best of it, but I'm best at doing it. But it's engaging with those on site in a way that they know you're with them and they know what you're saying is right and they're with you. But if it becomes a fight, as it has done too many times, I don't think you'll ever win, because they'll resist you just because they will. They need to earn money, and that becomes an issue.
Yes. Now, remember everyone, our presidential team are quite happy to take your questions. So if there are any things that you would like to ask or any points you would like to raise, you just pop those in the chat. My colleague Tommy will pick them up and I'll do my best to make sure that we get answers to you. If it's a technical question, we can't get an answer to you today, we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Now, I know that one of the things, Mark, that you have been very engaged on has been the Building Safety Act. And I think it is of some concern to all of you, the load of red tape and perhaps the lack of understanding that there is around things. Jonathan, as well, is very engaged in the EU revocation bill. He's doing some work on that for the industry as a whole with the Construction Industry Council at the moment. But Mark, could you perhaps take us through just a little bit of a short recap? I know there's a film coming up in a moment, so I don't want too much, but where you think that the Building Safety Act may help and how it might actually hinder health and safety. And then I'll hear from Ray and Jonathan about whether or not they agree with you or not.
I think the Building Safety Act, it's been put out there as in relationship to higher risk buildings, 18 metres, 7 stories or more. But the majority of it are changes to the Building Act 1984 and therefore the building regulations. And it brings in a new set of duty holder requirements that match those in CDM, but completely different from them. And the need for competency there, if it's joined up properly with CDM, remember this is a different requirement. You've got the same sets of duty holders, the client, principal designer, principal contractor, contractor and designer, you've got the same duty holders. But if they deliver well against building regulations compliance, and then also follow that same process, map those two processes together, I think the thing starts to work better. I know that architectural practices, quite a few of them, are looking to embrace the new requirements under building regulations because that's their stock in trade. But I would just hope that they start to embrace CDM in the same way and do everything together. There's an overlap. They're separate, but there's an overlap.
Do you think that this is something where there is an increasing burden of red tape? Jonathan, I know that your view of red tape's almost the other way round, isn't it? That you're worried that we're going to get rid of some of the legislation that perhaps we ought to be keeping. The EU revocation bill is a very technical bit of legislation. Many people won't even have realised, I suspect, that it's got some real crossover to building and construction safety. Can you explain just a little bit?
Certainly, Leslie. What we need to understand about the legislation that is going through, certainly the House of Lords at the moment, is that it gives ministers the absolute power to do what they like without consultation on legislation. And there certainly are many bits of legislation. There are 56 very specific health and safety bits of legislation that are included in the government's list, and to give ministers carte blanche to do what they like with them, I think is quite dangerous. And it's not about really red tape, because a lot of this legislation gives us great guidance on how to do things safely, and once you understand that, as with the Building Safety Act, as long as you understand what you're being asked to do, it's not really red tape. It becomes natural. It's part of your general working life. And I remember very clearly working on the Olympic Park back in 2012, and how we engaged with the workforce as a health and safety leadership team. Was really enlightening, because to take Mark's previous points, it's about engagement. People act safely when they realise what they're doing actually makes if they behave safely, they often find their jobs are easier, and actually they feel better, and it's about engagement. Absolute engagement with the workforce, and it's not really about red tape. People, sometimes I see people going overboard with paperwork when it's not necessary. That's red tape. It's people overplaying what they think needs to be done, when actually 99% of all health and safety legislation is about common sense, in my view.
Yeah, but common sense, Jonathan, come on. The one thing they say about common sense is it is neither sensible or common. So how do you get those messages across to people? Because surely there's a big communication exercise to be done here. How would you start getting those messages across? Ray, you're a lecturer. You know that sometimes it's quite difficult to get people engaged, particularly with the safety message. What do you do to get that message out there?
Well, when I'm lecturing, I do group events. So I create a scenario and then get the groups split, or the class split into 2 or 3 groups, and get them to act out that scenario. And then I'm there writing the gaps on the board of what's being missed, and then ask them to consider what's being missed and how they're going to interject that information. So that's how I do it. But just going back to the Building Safety Act with what Mark said, 100% agree with everything Mark said. I think one of the challenges with the introduction of the Act and the secondary legislation is it means it's changed in one form or another. Although with CDM it's a minor change if you incorporated it with the building safety, with the building regulations, but it's still changed. And some people will accept change and flourish in it, and some people will just not accept change. They can't accept change, they're set in the ways. So I think introducing any new legislation is always going to be a challenge. I think another section for me as well is when we look at the different risks that people face, what's the word? The new risks. New technology is introducing new risks, and we need to be able to understand them risks and communicate them risks to the workforce and to the designers and to the architects. So we're making them aware of that. One of the things I've introduced within my organisation is called leadership walkaround. And luckily I've got some really good clients that will get involved with this. So I will walk around with their senior management or their director to do a safety tour. So we're just walking around, we're stopping, we're talking to workers, we're asking them what they're doing, why they're doing it that way. We're giving them examples of something what went wrong previous week and how we've rectified that, and we'll congratulate them if they're doing good things. We'll also tell them if they're not doing so good things. But the thing from that is they're seeing the directors of the company taking an interest in their health and safety, and that's raising morale, it's raising the culture, and it's leading by example. So that's currently working really well. But it goes back to what Jonathan was saying, and you, Leslie, interacting, engagement, making sure we're showing leading by example.
Yeah, Mark, it must be quite difficult because you see this from the other end. You're trying to influence the people who are going to be putting a lot of this into law. How do you get people who are not technical experts to understand the ramifications of some of the things that they're bringing into law? Because that can't be an easy task.
The thing I find hardest is to I'm obsessive with the detail, but I think it's quite hard to keep. Not everybody needs to know everything, and it's trying to keep the message fairly simple. And I think the changes that are coming through are fairly straightforward and simple. But as a practitioner, I was sitting there thinking as you were talking that I went to a postgraduate diploma in Bournemouth a few years ago, and the lecturer said at the beginning of this 2-year course, I won't teach you anything new in these 2 years, but what I will do is I'll change the way you think. And I thought, well, that's a bit strange. And at the end of it, I got what he said. And there is nothing, when I'm preparing to speak to anybody, when I'm answering a question, when I'm writing a presentation, I constantly go back to the source material. I know where all the source material is. I constantly challenge myself about what I know and what I understand. And my view changes as I learn and I talk and I discuss with people. And I think that's it's the thing that's made the difference to my life from that course forward, is that somebody tells me something and I'll go away and I'll read it and I'll say, well, okay, so do I understand that now? I think we've all got to take part in that too. When somebody says, what's the building regulator, but what does the Building Safety Act mean for us? What's coming along? It's going back and trying to say, well, he said that to me, but I'll have a look at that. Okay, now I understand that. It's engaging with the detail, which will help everybody with the understanding.
Okay, we have been asked, what do you think have been the biggest changes that you've seen in your careers, and where do you see the industry going in the next 5 years? So can I maybe start with what you think have been the biggest changes over, say, the last 10, 15 years? Certainly since I've been at APS, I think one of the biggest changes has been the speed at which people have had to adopt more technological approaches to things. Every time you go onto Facebook or LinkedIn, there are new ways of building things. There's a lot more machinery involved. You've got bots out there that are laying bricks and pouring cement using 3D printing techniques and technology. And I suppose that all brings with it new risks. But for you, who actually do this for a living, where do you see the main changes having come from, and where do you see things going? Let's do a wee bit of future grazing, but let's start with what have been your biggest changes. Ray, where do you think the big changes have come?
I think the biggest changes have come in technology, how things have gone forward, moved forward, and some of the challenges to them changes are people understanding and adapting to them changes to technology. I remember a few months ago watching a program, a documentary on TV, and it said that the information technology that is currently in the world available would take the human brain 75 years to be able to catch up to use that technology to how it was developed, and that's just mind-blowing. But you know, we now see excavators on site that are operated by satellites, so the driver basically just sits there, tells him where to dig, how deep to dig if he's in a straight line. So I think the biggest changes for me is technology. I appreciate there's been many changes in legislative requirements, but I also see that that's always going to be the case. The legislation will always be reviewed and amended, and always be new legislation introduced. But I think the biggest challenge is how we interpret that technology and how we adapt ourselves to using that technology and being able to identify the risks and the hazards that come from that technology and introducing that as part of our safety practices.
Jonathan, you talked to us earlier about what it was like being a young engineer on site. You've talked us through a little bit about your experiences when you worked at the Olympic Park. Do you agree with Ray that it's all going to be a sort of a technological shift, or do you think there's anything else that we need to be catching up with and thinking about?
Technology is going to play a big part, especially when we start looking at what AI does, artificial intelligence. But for me, if I look back only over the last 10 or 15 years, for me, the big step change is the attitude of the tier one contractors, especially. They understood that actually safety helps their bottom line. And we suddenly see that tier one contractors take safety, health and safety, really to a really great degree, and they work hard to make sure their sites are safe, because their projects then run better, they have better quality, and so therefore it helps their bottom line. Our problem for our industry is to make sure that attitude goes throughout all contracting. So from tier 2, tier 3 contractors fully embrace and understand health and safety. Technology is going to play a part, but there's an awful lot of work still to be done to make sure that all construction is safe.
Mark, what are your thoughts about it? Because I know that you're very worried that people see safety as very much a judgmental thing, and that it's something that people see as an imposition.
I think the biggest change that I see on the line, and those who heard me speak on building safety will know, because I say it all the time, is assurance. Assurance through that construction process from beginning to end. There's far too much assumptions, product gets changed, all sorts of things, but that the health and safety file, I don't want to say hasn't worked, but hasn't worked. But there's going to be a change if people want to protect their PIs and stay out of courts from a building safety point of view, to make sure what was designed was right, to the right standard, was delivered to site. what was bought for the first time, was delivered to site, was installed by competent people. It's that assurance process from beginning to end, and then the correct information gets handed out at the end. And that will apply to building regulations, and I think that will need to start to apply to health and safety. So we get some really good health and safety files at the end, and those are integrated into the Reg 38 fire safety information. And users of that building, which, you know, people use that building for far longer than they build it, have some really good information to prove their building was built and is safe.
Okay, now we're going to come back just in a few minutes to looking at that whole liability issue. But just to round this off, we've had a question in from the floor, and it's a question about young professionals coming into the industry. For the industry to be safe, those people need to be able to get good site experience. And that is obviously something that's quite difficult either to learn from books or to be able to provide safely on site. What do you think we should be doing to help with that, both as an association and as an industry? Jonathan?
Thank you, Leslie, for coming to me first.
It's because I know you're very interested in young people and how we bring them on.
I think it is about, and it's how we engage. You know, for a lot of people who come in, certainly to what we do, when it comes to design risk management and CDM particularly, we don't really enter this sphere until probably into our 30s. But we need young professionals to understand how safety works, how health and safety works. And I know we do engage with students and in some form, but it's really interesting. I looked at construction management courses some years ago. Their course content on design risk management and safety is far, far, far greater than any of the other professions. So that's the architects, the engineers, and whatever else. And it's interesting that construction management are those guys who are going to go out onto site. They probably understand design risk management better than most young architects and engineers when they finish their courses. So it's a really difficult one, Leslie. I'm not sure how you do engage with those young professionals, but we certainly do need to engage with them to get them to understand what safety is all about.
Mark, you are so engaged with new things and new legislation, but you're dealing with people who are maybe quite established in their careers. How would you make sure that young professionals are able to operate safely on site? What do you think we should be doing? I can't hear Mark.
Mark, I think you're on mute.
It's okay. If we come back, Ray, perhaps until we've got Mark sorted out, you lecture young professionals all the time. What do you do to try and give them that real hands-on experience? Because I know sometimes people are very worried about taking people out on site because of the liability issue. What do you think we should be doing?
Well, I think it's a twofold question. I think one, we need to be aiming at universities who's delivering building safety courses, architectural courses, design courses, that type of thing, and getting across how important health and safety is. And the words I'm looking for is, I think most of us in the APS have fallen into a career that we're currently in. I don't think it was our leaving school main objective to become the people that we've become and the professionals we've become. We've fallen into that from different routes and different avenues. I think we should be looking at setting up a career path for new interns leaving schools, leaving universities and selling the career, which is a fantastic career. You can prevent people getting injured, you can prevent people from getting killed. And we need to show them there's a development path and the rewards of that, and introducing health and safety at the university levels and college levels, even if it's just to start with one unit. So we're highlighting the facts. And then the second part of that would come where we need to bring these people onto site to give them the work-life experience. Here's how it really is on site. Here's the challenges that you're up against, but also here's the rewards and the satisfaction of this career. So I think we've got a challenge to impose ourselves on universities and colleges to try and get some modules put in there for construction health and safety. That's the way we have to go, I feel.
Okay, thank you very much. Mark, we'll come back to you. How do you think we should engage with younger professionals and give them that hands-on experience?
I think there is a bit of a myth that young people can't come into safety. I took on somebody straight out of university quite a long time ago now, and they're now a senior safety director. And it was a lot of mentoring, a lot of discussion with them over continually about what they were doing and how they should be doing it, and passing all that experience. I think his mentoring is the real answer to it. Is pairing up young people with people who are more senior, and allow them to grow within that space. And I've done it more than once, and if I've achieved anything in my life, it's the people that have come out of my business and gone on and succeeded. And for that I'm most proud, and I think that young people can be mentored and can start early.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you very much for joining us this morning, gentlemen. It's lovely to see you. It's a slightly strange and surreal experience because I've got all three of them on screen in front of me, but it's lovely to meet you again on screen. We actually saw each other just last week face to face in London. I'll talk a little bit about that while I introduce our next speaker for today.